Hello there, Mark. How you
Hello,
doing?
Nathan.
It's Mark Westguard. Look,
It
Mark
is.
Westguard from WS Form. I apparently am in heaven. Um, this one day of the year when it's sunny in the UK, the sun comes directly through that window, and there's nothing I can do about it other than be in
I'm
complete
stuck in a
darkness.
blue box.
Yeah, you're stuck in a blue box. Just do that with your arms because it is funny. Yes. Look, Mark has no. What would be funnier if I put that arm out and it came into your screen? That would be genuinely funny.
Yeah, one
Um,
day I'll be able to afford a bigger green screen, but for
That's
now.
blue. It's not green. Thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it. If anybody is watching this live, me and Mark, by the way, just so that you know, we're taking this as an opportunity to record six primers, if you like, six videos in a series all about how to use WS Form. And so we're doing it live. We thought, well, let's do it live. So that's the process. If people wish to ask questions, they can, but we're treating this as an opportunity to get some content recorded, and then both Mark and I, WP Builds, can make use of it and so on. So yeah, it's a 6-part series. This is going to be the first episode. We'll get onto that in a moment. First thing, a little bit of housekeeping. If you are watching this live and you want to make a comment, feel free to do that. That's fine. The best way to do that is to either go to this page, which is wpbuilds.com/live. If you go there, then you need to be logged into some Google account because it's got it's got YouTube comments. So if you're logged in to Google in some way, shape, or form, then you can comment there. If you are in our Facebook group, then you can also obviously make comments through the Facebook system. But Facebook don't allow us by default to know who you are. So you have to go to chat.restream.io/FB. That's the platform that we're using. Chat.restream.io/FB, and tell Restream that you're happy to share that data. But that's fine. If you don't want to do that, that's completely fine. But yeah, I would say if you want other people to come and join us, please send them to that URL, wpbuilds.com/live. So, first up, Mark, we're on the first of our 6-part series.
Hmm.
I think probably it's apropos that you just introduce yourself, tell the audience who you are, how you got into WordPress, and for goodness sake, why on earth did you build a plugin in an already competitive marketplace?
Utter madness. No, I'm Mark Westguard. I'm the founder of WS Form. I've had a web agency for more than 2 decades, hence the greying hair. But decided to get into WordPress. I think we started probably about 10 years ago. So we're not a real veteran like some people, but about 10 years ago. And then decided to get into plugin building and decided to build WS Form because we just wanted to build a better environment for building forms, basically. And
Mm.
as a developer, saw some shortcomings, a small little gap in the market, and wanted to jump into that. So improving integrations and things like that. So that's where we are with WS Form.
It is, as you're about to find out, a really fabulous, I mean, totally credible form solution. I wouldn't be having Mark on if I didn't actually think that the product was ridiculously useful. And in all honesty, it's so good that it requires a bit of explanation. And what I mean by that is there's a whole load of hidden extras. And whilst you could read the documentation and all of that, and Mark's gone out of his way to make sure the documentation is full on, I just thought it might be a good idea to do a little primer. And so this first episode is going to be about form building basics. So that's episode number 1. And Mark's going to go through a laundry list of all of the different things that you need to set up a basic form. So, it's like the primer for the whole thing. Episode 2, which we're going to do in a week's time, will be all about building interactive forms. So forms that you can in somehow interact with. I guess there's conditional logic and things like that. The third one will be, and this topic rarely gets covered in all honesty, how to prevent form spam. This bit specifically interests me, deliverability, because that always confuses me. I know that there are ways to make your form entries more likely to hit the inbox, and efficiency. So that's number 3, preventing form spam, deliverability, and form efficiency. Number 4, we're going to look at custom field plugin integration. So how you can get forms to send data to custom field plugins, ACF, and so on. Number 5, this will be a good one, all about WooCommerce. I noticed that Rob Cairns has showed up asking about his pizza. That'll be in Rob. He said, "Yeah, where's my waiting for my pizza?" So out Mark will show us all about how to sell pizzas in that episode. And the last one we're going to do is going to be number 6, AI informs all the hotness at the moment, isn't it? And how can you actually make use of AI in forms? So that's our 6-part series. I think we've got the first 5 booked in consecutive weeks. The 6th episode is out on a limb at the moment. I'm not sure if we've got the date nailed down for that one, but it'll be coming, and it will be coming soon. So, Mark
Yes,
West
indeed.
on WS Form. What should we do? Should we kick off the first one, form building basics? Do you want to share your screen, or is there some preamble you want to do first?
Yeah, I think I'm already sharing my screen, so you might have
I
to
will enable it. There we go.
enable that. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think we'll
So
just make us a bit smaller. Oh no, not that one. Let's make us
there we
there.
go.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah, so in this episode, we really want to just cover some basics, but even people that use WS4 may pick up a few little tips as I click around. As Nathan says, WS Form is certainly more of a learning curve than other form plugins, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of features that make WS Form a lot more advanced than other form plugins. So we're going to start off by looking at the template library just very, very quickly so you can understand how that works. So we're going to assume at this point that you've installed WS Form. And there are 2 flavors of WS Form. There's a light edition, which is a free version that's available in the WordPress repo in the plugin directory. And we also have a pro edition as well, which has all the bells and whistles with it. The pro edition is this. We actually have 3 flavors of the pro edition. So we have a personal edition, which is a 1-site license. We have a freelance edition, which is a 5-site license. That comes with some of our add-ons as well. We'll go through those later on. And then we have an agency edition, which is an unlimited. So if you're an agency or a serious developer, the agency edition is a good option because that gives you pretty much everything that we offer in one package. And what I'm going to show you today, pretty much all of it works with the light edition and the pro edition. So we're not really going to go into too much pro stuff today.
Okay.
So the template library, so when you click on Add New under the WS Form admin menu, will show you a bunch of different tabs. And each of these tabs are different types of templates that come with WS Form. And we've got a popular tab here. So these are some of the more popular templates that people tend to use just to kind of get you going. We've also got things like application forms, booking forms. We have a demo tab as well, and that shows you how to build some of the more complex stuff in WS Form. A lot of these are in our knowledge base as well with some further explanation. But if you just want to click on one of these to build a certain type of form, you can do that. Some of the pro templates that we have are things like e-commerce templates, calculators, so you can do things like loan payments and car payments. Also things like Google Maps, for example. So if you wanted to put a Google map on a form and let people choose a location or have a Google address field, you can use these templates for that too. Now, everything in these templates can actually be built in the layout editor itself. So these are just kind of pre-made forms that you can use to investigate WS Form a bit more or use it as a foundation. So these are all static templates. When you click on these, it will just create the form that you see in the template.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have what are called dynamic templates. And dynamic templates are where we connect to a third-party platform, for example, Google Sheets or MailChimp or Salesforce or something like that. And when you click on those templates, it's actually going to pull information down from those services and build a form for you. So, for example, if you're using MailChimp, it'll actually show you your MailChimp lists that you have set up in MailChimp. And when you click to use a template, it's going to build the form based upon what you have in MailChimp. So it's not a static template, it's actually built dynamically.
Right.
And
Can I just drill into that, because that's
yeah,
dead cool.
yeah,
So you are at some point prior to having Mailchimp enabled, you would have gone into a setting somewhere and set up your Mailchimp API key or however Mailchimp works. And at that point, WS Form is consuming information about what you have set up, so the names of your lists and all of that
yes.
kind of stuff, and then what fields you've got in there and things like that. And then when you go to create the form, it's going to pull that in automatically for you.
Correct.
That's so
Yes.
cool.
Yeah, so in MailChimp, you can set up custom fields, you can set up categories, tags, and things like that. And it will pull that information down from MailChimp and build those forms for you. So it really does speed the process up. So I'll quickly show you how that's done if you go into settings on WS Form.
Oh, yeah, don't
And
show us
again,
any
this
API keys, by the way. Just
yeah. There's no
oh,
API
good,
keys
good.
because we use OAuth.
Okay, great.
OAuth is a much nicer way of connecting to a third-party service. So with some form plugins, you'll have to go and get the API key, copy and paste that into your settings to get it to connect. With ours, all you need to do is just click the connect button. It'll take you to MailChimp. It'll ask you to authorize the connection between WS Form and MailChimp. And then once that connection is established, it'll just say connected in settings here. And then when you go to add new, you will then see the MailChimp template category up here,
Mhm.
and it will then pull down your lists. Excuse me. And when you click on use template, it will then build that form for you. So I'll click on it here so you can see what it does. So this is it now talking to the MailChimp API. It's pulling down the data, and then we go, it's built the form for you. So it's got all the custom templates that I've created, any interest groups. It's ready with opt-in on there, and that form is basically ready to go.
So
Um,
all of the fields that we can see on the screen now are mapping directly to things that you've previously set up in Mailchimp,
Correct.
and it's automatically giving you some kind of GDPR checkbox as a field
Yeah.
as well. Is that what? Wow, nice.
Yeah, so all the templates are GDPR compliant out of the box, and it's also this form is basically ready to put on a page straight away. So all you have to do is click publish and then add it to a page. And under actions up here, I won't go too far into this because we're going to talk about that later. But you'll see this is actually mapped ready to your Mailchimp list, so everything is set up ready to go for you. So you really don't have to do anything other than change the layout of the form or remove fields or add whatever you need to make it look the way that you want. So those are the two different template types. We've got the static and the dynamic. We're going to start just with a static template to begin with, and I'm going
Can
to
I just
show
ask,
you.
sorry, another
Yeah,
question
yeah,
there.
go ahead.
Was there something in the UI there that showed us, was that little sort of circular icon that I noticed next to Mailchimp and Google Sheets, is that the indication that that one's dynamic? No.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
and
Okay.
and if you click on that template, let's say for example you've added an additional list to
Yep.
Mailchimp, you can click this little icon here, and it will actually update that list for you.
Got it.
So,
Brilliant.
so that little circular icon there is clickable, and it will actually refresh the data that you're seeing on that page.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go ahead and we'll just create a basic contact us form. We'll go into the layout editor. And next thing we're going to talk about is the anatomy of a form in WS Form. And it's pretty straightforward. But at the outer part of the form, you have tabs. All forms have one tab by default. And if you have one tab, that tab doesn't actually show. But if you add additional tabs, then you'll start to see those tabs on the form itself. And tabs can be used to build a multi-step form. So if you've got quite a complex form and you want to split that up across 3 or 4 different steps, you can use tabs to do that. Now, tabs will show as a tab on your website, but you can actually hide those tabs and use next and previous buttons if you want. You can style those tabs, and we have some information in the knowledge base about doing that. So there's lots of different ways that you can use tabs to split a form out. And in the next series, in the next show that we do, we'll actually show you how to build interactive forms in other ways because you can actually hide sections, hide tabs, show tabs, and you can make things a lot more interactive. But if you wanted to create an additional tab on a form, you can just literally click the add tab icon here, and then start building out your next tab in this section here. So you've got tabs, and then you have sections within a tab. And a section is just a logical grouping of fields. So you may have billing address, shipping address. You might have personal information, my inquiry. However you want to lay it out, you can do that with WS Form. And sections can be resized. So by default, they're going to be the full width of the device or the space that you're putting the form in. But you can actually resize those sections if you want as well. So you can just drag these 3 little dot icons here, which are actually part of our logo, and you can drag that to whatever width you want. You can also,
Can I ask at that point, can you
yeah,
give me a scenario where making it say 50% is a good idea? Because obviously
sure,
if you put that into a, I don't know, let's say a short code
yeah,
on in a short code block in the WordPress editor, so
hmm
half the space will be empty, but you can't fill that space with anything else.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So an example of that would be, and we'll go into the responsiveness stuff in a moment, but maybe you want to have two sets of fields side by side. So you'd want
Ah,
to
got it.
set the width of that to 50%. Maybe this would be, I don't know, maybe this would be fitting address. And then you'd want to have a set of fields next to that. So you can actually click on the settings icon, click copy, and it will put it to the
Got
right of
it.
it. And
Bravo.
then
Nice.
there's your shipping address.
I hadn't picked up that that was even possible. That's so cool. Nice. Yeah, yeah.
That's why these tutorial videos are
Yeah,
useful,
yeah.
right?
That's great.
Yeah. And then, on this size, you may want to make these full width and adjust the size of the fields as well. Now, we'll go, and again, we'll come on to this a bit more later on, but we've got at the bottom here, we have the breakpoint selector. Now, a breakpoint selector basically allows you to preview the form on different devices. So here we have mobile, and I can drag this across, and I can go from like almost like an iPad to a laptop to a full size computer. Now, the way that responsiveness works is typically you're going to want to build your form in a mobile centric way. So you start off with a mobile layout where you're using a full width. So for that, you may want to have the sections full width. So on a mobile device, you've got as much space as possible to fill out that field. You can then move up to maybe a laptop size. And on a laptop, you may want to have two columns.
Yeah.
And then as you go up to desktop, you may want to introduce another column because you've got so much more space there. Now, as I now drag this left and right, you'll notice it's remembering the layout for each breakpoint. So when you preview this form, if I preview that, I'll pull that away from the editor. If I now resize this,
Yep. There it
you'll
is.
see there
Yep.
your form is now responsive. So the very briefly, that's the responsive side of it, and that's where a couple of columns, comes into
Yeah.
effect.
That's
So
cool.
really, you can build different layouts for each device type, and I think we're the only form plugin that does that, where you can actually develop different layouts for different sizes, and you have full control over the width of the sections and the fields within those. So going back to the anatomy, we've got the tab, we've got sections, and then we've got the fields within those sections. And you can add any number of fields that you want within a section. You can add any combination of different fields that you want. And again, with the field, you can resize those fields, and you can also offset those fields as well. So you can choose where you want those fields to appear within that section. Now, obviously, if you resize, if I make that half width and then I make the section half width,
Yep.
then the field's going to adjust in size according to the size of the section. So you've got a lot of flexibility around, the placement, the width, the offset of the field. You can also click and drag elements within the layout editor as well. So if I want to move the first name field below last name, I can just click and drag it. Very, very easy to do. You can also click and drag sections. So if we just put these back as two sections side by side, I can actually drag the sections side by side if I want to as well. So you can reorder those. In
Nice.
addition to that, you can also drag sections between tabs. So if you decide you want this section here to be in this second tab, you can actually drag that into that second tab and drop it in there. And it will then enable you to split up a much longer form between different tabs. And again, I can copy that. I can copy that just to bring back another section to the side of it. You can also drag fields between tabs. So if you find that you want to move the email field itself to a different tab, you can do that
Oh,
and move it
nice.
to a different tab. So you can move things around very, very easily. Each of the sections and fields and tabs can be copied. So if I go to a tab at the top here, I can actually copy that entire tab if I want to, and then I can make whatever edits I want to that. You can copy sections, you can copy fields. So it's very easy to duplicate content within WS Form. Now, in addition to that, we also have what's called a section library. And if we go to the section library, to get to that from the toolbox, you click on the section tab at the top right here. And what I can do is I can actually drag full sections onto my form. So if I wanted to pull in an address field without building that manually, I can just drag this section across and it'll build that section out on the form for me. So
Nice.
super quick to build uh, forms that way. Now you may build a section that you like the look of and you want to use it somewhere else. So let's just make a change to this. Let's just for argument's sake, we'll make that 3 column and we say, yeah, we want to use that somewhere else on the form, on this form, a different form, or even on a different website. I can actually add this to my own section library. So if I click on edit on those section settings, I can click here and I can do add to my sections. So if I click on that, it'll then add that to my sections up here. And then if I go maybe to a different tab, I can then drag that section into that tab.
There it is.
So sections are like a little, almost like a pinboard where you can put bits of forms that you like the look of and you want to use them elsewhere. You can also download these sections. So if I download that, it'll give me a little JSON file down here in my browser. And I can then drag that into a completely different website and move sections between sites if I want to. You can even put an entire tab into this section library as well. So if I edit the tab and then I do add to my sections, that will then pull in that entire tab as a section that I can use somewhere else
That is
on a different
nice.
website or on that site. Yeah. So use this as a way of capturing pieces of the form that you want to use elsewhere. The nice thing about that feature as well, and we'll come into this probably in the next show that we do, but if you have any conditional logic and there's any interactivity in that section, that interactivity is actually stored in that section. So when you drag it into another field, that interactivity will still work.
So you're gonna have to explain that to me. I don't know what do you mean by interactivity in that case?
Yeah, so let's just say, for example, we had some conditional logic that showed address line 2 if you filled something out on
Got it.
address line
Got it.
1.
Got it. Got it. Right.
Yeah, that interactivity, that functionality that you've put into that section would be saved in that section library. So when you drag it to another place, it'll still behave in the same way.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So that is kind of the anatomy of the form. We've got the tabs, we've got the sections, we've got the fields. Let's talk about adding fields to the form. So there's 2 ways that you can do that. And we have about 55 core field types. All the field types are very feature rich. And this is where WS Form can be a little bit of a learning curve because the fields just do so much. But if you want to add a field to a form, you can either drag and drop that field anywhere that you like within a section. And the other way you can do it, if you're more familiar with this, you can just click the field and it'll add it to the bottom of the section that you were last editing.
Got it.
So if I were to edit a different section and I click on that, it'll add it to that particular section. So it kind of remembers where you are in your editing process. Each field, if you click on field settings, then has a bunch of different settings in there. And I'll go through some of the basic ones now, just so people are aware
Yeah.
of what those are.
Nice.
So you've got the usual things like adjusting the label of a form. So if we wanted to change the label, you can just type in the label here. You'll notice when I'm typing that in, it's actually editing that on the
Yep.
layout editor as well. You can also double click on the label in the field as well and edit it there if you want. So you can do it both ways, whichever way you're more comfortable with doing. Show label determines whether the label is actually shown on the form itself. So if you want to hide the label, you can do that. Some people like to maybe just use a placeholder. They might just want to do first name there and not show the label. Or if they want to show the label and not have a placeholder, they can do that. They
I
can,
like your default of on though for accessibility. That's a good
yeah,
approach, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, and everything in WS Form, as far as we possibly can, is ARIA compliant. In terms of having all the accessibility tags behind the scenes to make sure that the form is accessible. And there are ways of editing that, and I'll come on to that to show you how you can do that. You can make a field required by just checking the required checkbox. If you don't want the field to be required, you can just uncheck that. You can also hide fields, and again, we'll come on to this in the next show where we're talking more about interactivity. So you can hide and show fields dynamically if you want to. It's often a good idea if you've got a very long form to only show the fields that are appropriate to the person filling out that form.
Mm.
So we can use things like checkboxes to switch on sections, switch on fields, and that's where that hidden feature comes in. You can set the default value of the field, so you can literally just type in a value if you want. So I could say my default value, and there are more advanced ways that you can do that as well. So we actually have a complete library of variables that you can put into that field. So if you wanted, for example, to put the name of your blog in a value, you could put hash blog underscore name. And I won't go into those in too much detail, but there's an awful lot that you can do with the variables to make forms interactive. You can even copy values between fields as well. So if I wanted, just for argument's sake, if I wanted address line 2 to match address line 1, I can do something like hash text, hash field, and then put the ID of address line 1 in there like that. That will then copy dynamically the value of address line 1 into address line 2.
Got it. Right.
And yeah, so that's where it starts getting a little bit complicated, but we're going to try and stick to the basics today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that default value can do an awful lot. You can also even do calculations with it. So you can do things like summing numbers together, cosine tangents, and all kinds of stuff. So
Oh, so a good example there would be, I don't know, you want 12 months of a subscription and you want tier 2 of the subscription, which is $10. So you could
yeah,
do this field multiplied by this field gives you $120 in the.
correct.
Yeah, got it, got it,
Yep,
got it.
absolutely correct. Yeah, so you can do that's how our calculated templates work a lot of the time. So we use calculated fields to do that. So
But
that's
neat having an actual physical calculator there.
yeah,
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 yeah.
that's
So
neat.
you can actually choose the fields and then insert them using this feature here.
That's neat.
Um, yeah, and this is where WS Form comes into its own. As you go into the settings, you'll see more and more things opening up that just speed up development of forms for you
Nice.
to make it easier. There's also a variable library here as well, so you can actually insert the value of another field, and then you can see how many different variables we have in here. There's just all kinds of
Yeah,
stuff
there's a couple.
that we won't go into right now, but
Yeah.
yeah, and then and we've only got as far as default value. So, so yeah, you've got placeholder. Again, you can put variables in there, so you can actually use the variables pretty much anywhere in these settings to make the field dynamic. Help text enables you to put text below the field to give the user some explanation about what that field is used for. Always a good idea to fill that out.
Yep.
Um, you've got some more advanced features here like autocomplete. So when you go to some forms, sometimes it will try and autocomplete those fields. Maybe it will try and put your first name, your last name, your email address based upon other fields that you've filled out. And you can actually, it'll do that automatically with WS Form. But if you want to force it to use a particular element for a text field, then you can use this to instruct WS Form on how to do that. You can also determine which virtual keyboard appears on mobile devices. So in some cases, you may just want to have numbers, or you might just want to, or you may be using an email address. So you can actually choose the virtual keyboard that's used for that field when someone taps on it. And that
That's
just gives,
great.
yeah, so it just gives you a lot more control over what the user is interacting with when they're using your form. Because it's always frustrating, isn't it, when you have to fill an email address out and it comes up with a normal keyboard. You've got to try and find shift to get the at symbol. When
Yeah.
so if you can actually show the email keyboard, most of the time it will do that automatically again, but you can use this to override that.
Can I ask a peculiar question about that?
Yeah.
If I'm on my phone and
Yep.
I'm in a form field which is just the keyboard, it's an address or something, and
Yep.
then I go to a number field.
Yep.
How does that work? Like, does it collapse the keyboard on the mobile and then reintroduce the new keyboard? Does it,
I think
or
it literally just changes,
just on the
to
fly? Right. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it just changes it. Now, a mobile device will do that based upon the type of field that you're interacting with. So it'll do that automatically most of the time. So this is just a feature if you
This is
want
an
to change that.
override. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an
Nice.
override. Yeah. Prefixes and suffixes. So that enables you to put things like a percentage sign at the end of a prefix. I can show you a quick example of that. So let's go prefix. So there's some examples there of prefixes and suffixes.
Got it.
So if you want to put something before it that they can't necessarily change, but it just helps them fill that form out, then you can use the prefix and suffix to do that. In terms of accessibility, we set the label for the field, the AR. It's called an ARIA label, and that is what is used by screen readers and other accessibility software to identify that label. So we'll use the label of the field by default. But if you find that that label doesn't read very well to a screen reader, you can override that and put in whatever you want here. So you could say, enter the second line of your address,
Yeah, great.
for
Yeah.
example. So you can use that feature there to override that if you want to improve the accessibility. I'm not going to go through these other features here right now because we're going
Okay.
to cover those in another show. But that's just some of the settings that we have. Now, these are just the basic settings. Then we get into advanced stuff where you can change the label position. You can actually change the vertical alignment of that field in relation to other fields. If you're familiar with CSS, you can actually put field wrapper and field classes on there, which enable you to have more control over styling fields. And then we also have, so just going back a step, all of our fields, we've basically taken the HTML5 spec for that field type and given you control over all the attributes that are available for those fields. We also have some additional functionality which we feel is useful for that field that isn't kind of browser standard, but we've built that in just to make it easier for you so you don't have to write any custom JavaScript to make it do that. So things like minimum word counts, maximum word counts. You can also put input masks on field as well. So for example, if you wanted to have, maybe you've got a special code which has to have 2 characters at the beginning and 4 numbers after it. You can use this input mask feature to aid people when they're filling the form out to make sure that they're entering it in the correct format. You can also make sure that when the input mask is entered, that we validate that mask to make sure they've entered it incorrectly, in which case they can't submit the form until they've filled it in correctly.
Right. Right.
More advanced features are things like pattern matching, where you can put regular expressions in. And I'm not even going to go into regular
No,
expressions in
there's a
this series.
whole nother series.
Yeah, that needs its whole week. And there's things like transform as well, so you can force it to be uppercase, lowercase, so on and so forth. So these are just the options on a text field.
Yeah.
Every single field type has its own set of options, and as I say, there's about 55 core fields, and then WS Form add-ons, such as maybe the Stripe add-on or I don't know, a WooCommerce extension. Those introduce additional field types as well, so you can actually plug additional field types into this. If we look at a different type of field, maybe a choice field, like a select field, if we drag one of those onto the form, um, again, you've got all the usual options in here. I'm not going to go through all those now. We've gone through most of those. But if we go to options, which is where you choose what options will appear in that select drop down, you'll see here we've got a data grid. At the top right-hand side, there's an expand icon, which makes this a bit easier to see.
Ah, nice. Yeah.
So you can expand any of the sidepaths just to make them full screen, and it just makes interacting with that a bit easier. So most form plugins, you're going to be able to add additional options to that select drop down, and you can do that with WS Form. So I can click on Add. I can add another option here. Super simple. Now you may want to have different values submitted for different labels that are shown. So the way a select field works is there's a label that you see, and then when you actually choose that, what gets submitted
Mhm.
is a value for that particular option. So with a data grid, you can actually add columns. So I can add a values column, and then I may actually want that value to be 1, 2, 3, 4, i.e. that's what I get when I receive that form from the
Yeah.
user.
Yeah.
Now, because I've added that column, we want to choose which column is going to be the value column. So I just click on here and choose values.
Oh, I see. So
I,
whatever you label, so it doesn't have to be labeled values. It could be anything
correct.
you like.
Yeah,
Right. Got it.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah. So that could be anything at all. So I could
Yep.
put values A, B, C there,
Yep. Yep.
and then I would then just choose that down here for the value column mapping. Now, this is a little bit like a spreadsheet, like a Google sheet, and I can actually add even more columns to it if I want. And I could call this column A, column B, and column C. Now I can then choose those columns for those mappings. So if I happen to have a spreadsheet that's got a lot of columns in it, but I don't want to use all of those, I can choose which columns I want to use for that mapping. So to give you an example of that, you can actually drag and drop CSV files into these data grids. So here I've got a
No way,
CSV
that's
file.
so cool.
So if I take this CSV file here, which is a CSV of countries, I can drag that into here and it will pull that data in. And then you'll see all the columns that are available in that CSV file. So
That's
again,
cool.
what I can do is I can choose which column I want to be for the label and which column I want to be for the value. So maybe I want to use the alpha 3 column for the actual value. So you can see where the power of these data grids comes in. On the right-hand side here, we can determine which row is selected by default. I can actually disable rows if I don't want them to, if I want them to appear disabled on the front end. And I'll show you this in a preview in a second so you can see how it looks.
Yeah,
And I can also hide rows as well. So if I don't want these rows to actually show, I can actually hide those as well.
got it.
Now, there's another cool thing you can do with this, and you can actually do what's called an opt group. So with a select field, you can actually make the list that's shown be logically grouped into what are called opt groups. And I can do that automatically with data like this. If I go to settings and I do auto group by, and then I can say I want to auto group that by region, it will now go through my data and actually automatically opt group that by that region column. And now we've
Ah,
got 6 different op groups. So if we save that and we preview it, you'll now see we've got our country list and it has been opt grouped automatically for you. And you see here's ones that been
there's one you
disabled.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's a bunch that you may have hidden as well, which we can't see. That is
yeah,
super
yeah.
cool.
So we can't see those.
Yeah.
So that's yeah. So that just kind of shows you the power of the data grid there. Now it goes a little bit further than that. So we can also use this data source option up here to speed things up for you. So if you don't have a CSV of countries, we actually have some presets for you that you can use. So if you choose data source preset, down here you can actually choose some preset lists from our server. So I can actually put in states US, for example, click get data. That will pull it from our server into this data grid, and there's your select drop down automatically built for you.
So it's a pre-built bunch of data sources, a little bit like the CSV that you just dragged in.
Yep.
It's if in effect it's doing that. Can you just show us those again, just to give
Yeah,
us an
sure. So
indication?
let's go back to preset,
Yeah.
and then we choose the different presets here. So
Okay.
you've
So
got everything
yeah,
from business codes, colors, date time options, e-commerce like currency lists, geographic lists, personal stuff, maybe for like a survey,
yeah, yeah.
and there's some more survey stuff down here as well. So you can use any of these free charge. We've actually got them on the website as well as CSV files. If people want to download them, they're very welcome to use those. And you just click on Get Data, and it will pull that data down, and there it is, loaded up for you.
That is
Now,
so cool.
if you've built a data list yourself, a data grid yourself, you'll notice at the top right-hand side here, we've got an import CSV and a download export CSV as well. So if I download that, click here, I'll get a CSV file from that data grid, and I can then drag that into
Another
another
one.
site if I
Yeah.
want. Yeah. So a little bit like the section library, but you can actually drag and drop the data that you've got in those select drop downs. Now with select fields are just notoriously slow on forms on in a browser. Don't know why they've always been really really slow, particularly when you've got lots and lots of options in there. And obviously, lots and lots of options means there's a lot of data on your page.
Yep.
Now, you may want to, you can actually speed that up by using a system called Select2. Select2 is a library, and Select2 you've probably seen before where you start typing in a name and it'll select that from a list of options.
Yep.
So, normally with a form plugin, you'd have to write some JavaScript to make that work. With WS Form, you can just click Enable, and it'll actually add select2 to that field. So if we save and close that, and then we preview that, you'll see now select2 is out on this field. So I can now type in
Got it.
code, and it'll bring up a list of results. Now, there's also an option to enable Ajax on that. Now, what Ajax does is it actually removes the options from your page, and as you type in, it will make a request to the server to pull back options that match what you're typing in. So,
Yeah. Yep.
nice thing about that is it can speed up the rendering of your form if you use that option. So that's as far as I'm going to go right now with Select 2. It's just an option that I want people to be aware of because it can really speed up big long lists. So there you go. So there's two field types that we've gone through. So you've
Yeah.
got everything
Yeah.
from text area, a number field for literally just typing a number in. Even the number field has a multitude of different options in it for things like maximum, minimum. You can also do a step on it as well.
So
So
it
on a
goes up in
number field,
tens or something. Yep.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you do 10. A lot of people don't know you can actually type in any in there as well, which will just let it be any number of decimal points for what you're typing in. If you wanted to do, a maximum of 2 decimal steps, you would actually set that step to zero point zero 0.01. That's how it works on a number field.
Okay.
But by default, that'll be one and just a whole number. Then we've got choice fields. You've got things like the select that I just showed you. Checkboxes and radios work in a very similar way to select. So use that data grid to control what checkboxes appear and what radios appear. You've also got a nice feature with these as well called cascading. And I'll show you a very quick example of that.
Yeah, please.
So if we go to knowledge base and we'll just do a search for it because it'll save me building it.
Yeah.
So let's
Nice.
let's do. Let's see what we've got on here. Cascaded lookups. This one's probably a good one to do. So a very simple example would be like a vehicle make, model, and year selector. So when you click on Dodge, it'll then give you the models for a Dodge. Click on Challenger, and there's the years for that. And that's called cascading. Again, I'm not going to go into that in great detail, but it is a feature of the select checkbox and the radio. So you can actually do that with
Oh,
checkboxes as
yeah.
well. And you can do it with radios. You can
That's
even do
great.
you can actually do mixed as well. So I could say I want those two, and then I want to choose a sub-region, and I want to choose that as a select. So you can actually do it between different field types as well.
Oh, boy.
Yep. Okay, and then we've got some more advanced field types. So we've got things like file uploads. I mean, file uploads, we could probably do a whole episode on that as well.
Yeah.
But in its simplest form, it'll put a nice upload area on your form. So if we click
I
on
actually
preview,
really like the way this looks on your forms.
yeah, yeah, and if I just take a screenshot, and then I can drag that up into there, very simple for people to be able to upload files.
Yeah.
You can upload multiple files, single files. One of the other cool features with the file upload field that some of the form plugins don't have, if, for example, you've got a form that you want to use specifically on a mobile device, you can even choose which camera will be used when they click on that field. So you
That's
can
so
make it
good.
take a selfie or what's called the environment facing camera, which is the outgoing camera on the back of your phone. Or you can just leave that off and it'll pop up and ask you how you want to take your photo. That integrates in with things like Dropbox and Google Drive, or you can use the media library, however you want to use that. So that's one of the more advanced fields in WS form. Now, we've also got mapping, Google Maps, spam protection, which we're going to go into in another episode. And then you've got things like content. So if you wanted to add some description to your form, you can just drag and drop a text editor field onto your form here, edit that, and then you can write some instructions, not literally some instructions, but write some instructions in there. And that will then appear on your site as some text to help that user out with using your form. If you want to add some internal notes about your form, maybe you've done something that you want to remember about, you can actually drag a note onto your form as well. And you can write whatever internal notes about your form that you want there, and that will then only appear in the layout editor and not on the front end of the site.
Oh, that's great. It's like CSS, it's like commenting, basically.
Yeah. So it's
That's
like
cool.
adding comments to your form. And you can add as many of those notes as you like, and you can put them wherever you want. So
I'm guessing the yellow is indicative of this won't show on the front end.
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, you can add as many of those as you need. I find though I've actually started adding those to our form templates because I think it's quite helpful to have some
Oh, yeah.
preamble about
Yeah. Yeah.
what that template does. Um, buttons. you're always going to want a submit button on your form. Otherwise, people can't submit the form. So you can put a submit button anywhere you want with WS Forms. So a lot of form plugins just have the submit button at the bottom of the form. It's kind of fixed. With WS Form, you can put that anywhere you like. You can change the size of that submit button. You can put one at the top, put one at the bottom, wherever you want to put it. But you need at least one of those, otherwise your form's not going to be much use.
Yeah.
There's also a save feature as well. This is a pro version, but if I add a save button to the form, simple as that. When I preview that form, you'll see we've got a save button here. So if I put something in this number field here and hit save, and then I refresh that form, and when I come back, that's going to be filled out because I've
Right.
saved that form. No JavaScript required. Just add the save button. It's as simple as that, and it handles everything for you. There's also a save and continue feature that you can use with email. So it'll actually send an email to the user, give them a special URL, and then they can use that URL to come back to the form later on if they want to.
That's
Um,
gonna be super cool with WooCommerce and things, isn't it,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And that's really helpful if you've got a really long form and people just don't want to fill that out in one go. By having a save button on there, you can give them the option of coming back later on.
Yep.
You've got things like previous tab and next tab. So here as we've been mashing this form together, we can actually add a previous tab button to that form, and we can add a next tab button to that form. And we probably don't want a previous tab button on the first tab, but anyway. But if we look at that, you'll see it's
Yeah, yeah.
disabled the previous button because we're on the first tab. But if I hit next, it's going to take us through to that next tab. So you can use those buttons to build up interactivity and build up the navigation for your form. And again, you can put those anywhere you want. You can put them at the top, put them at the bottom, style them however you want. It's very, very easy to use. You can also do tab validation as well, which I'll show you real quick. So let's make a couple of fields required. Let's just make address line 1 and city required, just for example. And we'll save that. Now, you may not want people to progress to the second tab unless those two fields are completed. So what you can do is if you go to form settings at the top right here, these are all settings that relate kind of globally to the form
This
itself.
is
They're not.
all the entire thing, right, right.
Yeah, yeah. And if we scroll down on this basic tab here, under tabs, you can go to tab validation. So if I check that and I hit save and close, you'll notice now that the second and third tab are now disabled. I can't click on them. And that's
Ah,
because I
okay.
haven't filled out everything I need on this first form. So, and there are various different ways of doing this. You can actually as well, if somebody hits a next button, I can say show the invalid fields. So if I hit
Got
save and
it, got it.
close,
Right.
and if I got here and I try to hit that next button, it's going to highlight all the fields that haven't been completed. So it's saying, oh, fill those out before you hit that next button.
Right.
You can even hide those tabs if you want. So if you don't even want to show those tabs, and you just want to rely on that next and previous, I can say hide tabs. Hit save and close. It'll now hide those tabs for you. And now I've just got a pure next and previous
Got
type
it.
of form.
Got it.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So a lot of control over how that user interface works. Again, this is where WS Forms is a little bit more complex than some form plugins, a little bit more of a learning curve. But once you know where these things are, it really does become quite powerful. So those are your buttons. You've also got repeatable sections as well. So let me show you what those do. Let's start with a fresh form because we're getting a bit, bit of a mess with that form there. So let's just start again.
Bit busy.
So let's add a new section to this form. So to do that, you click on the add section icon at the bottom of the form here. I'm going to drag that to the top here. And we may just want to have a very simple section where we can add people to it. So let's just do 2 fields, we'll put them side by side. First name, I'm going to hit tab here. You'll notice that takes me
Oh,
to the
so
next
you're off to the
label.
next one, yeah. Accessible again. Nice.
Yeah. And then we want to change this and make it repeatable so we can add multiple people. Super simple in WS Form. There's no coding required or anything. Just edit that section and click enabled on repeatable. If I hit save and close, you'll notice it's going to do something for you. It's added a field automatically for you. So it's added some icons, and those icons are the user interface for that repeatable section. So if we preview that, you'll see it's added an add, delete, move up, move down icon. So I can put in first and last name, add, and I can add another row, or I can remove a row, or I can
Got it.
move those up and down. These icons can be completely configured as well. So if we go into the icon settings, you'll see here are the icons that we're showing. We give you the ability to change the accessibility labels on those as well. So those are fully configurable. And you can add additional icons. So you've got things like drag, reset, clear. So if I didn't want to move up and move down, I can just remove those. Hit save and close. You'll notice when I make changes as well, it automatically
Yeah, you're
updates
not
in the
refreshing, are
preview.
you? I was just about to point that out. It just refreshes itself.
Yeah,
That's just a nice
yeah,
little time
yeah.
saver, yeah.
That's it. Add be there. So you can actually drag and drop these and move them
Perfect.
around any way you want. So that's repeaters, and we'll go on to that a bit more in the next series that we do. But it's just a nice way of, if you've got something where somebody maybe wants to type in a list of people or maybe an order form, then you can use that repeater to enable people to add rows rather than having 10 rows already visible. You can use that repeater just to make that easier to use. And again, that's fully responsive. You can change the layout of this. You can even change the width of that repeatable section as well. So if we preview that, if I hit add,
Yeah,
I'll actually
nice.
put it next to it as you click add. So that's repeaters. What else have we got? I'm not going to go into e-commerce today or WooCommerce. We'll talk about that later on. So I think that's kind of the basics of the layout editor. The other thing I just want to quickly show as well is let's just make some changes to this. And we'll resize these fields. We'll do whatever we want to do with it. So you've got undo in WS Form as well. So this third tab here next to the section library is undo, and it remembers every step that you've done on
Wow.
this form. And I can go back to the initial form and then go back to any part of that development process. So if you accidentally delete something or you've made a mess somewhere, then you can come into here and actually go back and get the form back to a previous state. You can also use the undo button at the top here to go
It's
back,
one at a time, right, right. Yeah.
and you can redo as well. So if you want to go back up, so you'll notice on that undo history, that little blue icon is moving up and down.
Are there any
On
caveats to that? In other words, is that saved in the cache as
It's saved in the browser, yeah.
as a cookie? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so if you come out of this session and come back in, that undo history is going to reset.
Got it.
We don't store every single form change on the server because it would just start.
Just kill you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'd have
Yeah.
so much data in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's all done. It's actually stored browser side. So if you do make a mistake while you're editing a form, you can go back and edit that at any point that you want. And then, so let's just quickly look at the debug console on the front end. Let's go back to a simple form so that we've got something simpler to look at. And when we preview the form, and this is a pro feature, this is not in light, but at the bottom here, you'll notice we have a debug console. And this debug console only usually appears if you're an administrator logged in. This won't appear to your users. You can actually hide this as well if you don't want to use it as a developer by clicking the close button at the right-hand side here. But what this debug console does, it's a really, really useful tool for speeding up the development of your forms. And I'll show you how that's done. So at the top here, you've got a tab called, so this is showing that we've got Contact Us form loaded on this page. If you had multiple forms on the page, which again is something WS Form supports and some form plugins don't, you can actually have multiple forms on the page, even of the same form. So if you wanted an email sign up, like a newsletter sign up, and you
Hmm.
wanted that at the top of the bottom of your page, then you can do that. So that this tab here shows all the different forms you've got
Yep.
on your
Yep.
site. Below that, under Tools, you've got Populate. Now, this is the cool part. So if I've got a really complex form and I want to test that, usually I've got to type fill that form out every time I test it. With this, we can just click Populate, fills the form out for.
Oh,
How about that?
that is
Every
cool.
every time I hit Populate, I get different data. There's also a Populate and Submit button here. If I click on that, it populates the form and submits it in one go. So super easy to test forms. And that works with pretty much all of our field types. It'll even do signatures. So if I add a signature to the field, let's just put it at the top of the form.
I'm curious to see what signature is.
John Doe
John
comes
Doe.
up.
Yeah.
So yeah, every time you hit populate, you're going to get different data. There's also a log tab here that shows you what's going on with your form. So, and we'll go into that in the next episode, where we do an interactive stuff. It will show you any calculations that happen, conditional logic, and things like that. And if there are any errors, then we've got an error log here as well. So this tool here can really speed up your form development process by using that populate feature.
That's
So just
great.
a couple of quick other things we're going to do before we wrap up. And again, we're going to go into these in more detail in the next episode. But we have conditional logic. And this is the conditional logic icon at the top of the site here. And this is where you start to add interactivity to your form. So you can do things like if the first name equals ABC, then set the last name, set the value to DEF. Again, you can expand this out to make this easier to read.
Boy.
So if we hit save and close on that, we go to contact us. If I then type in ABC, you'll see last name becomes DEF. So the conditional logic enables you to build very interactive forms. So that's a very simple example
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
a condition, and we'll go into this in more detail. But you can do things like with color fields, check hue levels. You can check to see if the form is validated or not. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with this, and all of these options are context sensitive to the field that you're editing. You'll notice as well as I fill out that conditional logic, it's highlighting the fields that I'm interacting with.
Yeah. That's no, I
Also,
hadn't noticed that. That's good. Yeah.
if I choose something to do with a section, it'll actually highlight that section. So it just makes it a little bit easier to work out which parts of the form you're interacting with in conditional logic. And then finally, actions, just quickly touch on that. So actions run whenever a form is saved or submitted. So usually when a form is submitted. So by default, you're going to want to save that submission to the WordPress database so you can recall it later on and look at it. You're going to want to show a message. The message would say something like, thank you for your inquiry, or thank you for your booking, whatever it may be. And you're going to want to send an acknowledgement email, maybe to you or to the user or both. And you can add any number of actions that you want. So you could send an email to myself, and I can copy that actually. I can copy actions, and I could say send an email to the user, and then I can adjust the fields in there to send that to the user. And we'll talk more about that in our
Yeah.
email deliverability one that we're covering. So that's actions. So there you go. There
In
is
the
a
action
whirlwind
section, I
tour.
just want to say that's where you
Yeah,
would find like the sort of MailChimp stuff. It would
correct.
if you were using a MailChimp template that Mark had automatically consumed the data in, one of those actions would be something like submit to MailChimp or whatever it may be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you don't have to use those templates. So if you build a form and you find you want to push that to MailChimp, you can just say, okay, let's add an action. And we would do add to MailChimp.
Got it.
And then we would choose the MailChimp list that we want. And then we would map those fields. So I would say I want to map this form field, first name, to first name in MailChimp. And I want to map the last name to the last name in MailChimp. So this is basically your form fields being pushed to MailChimp field.
Yeah.
I don't know
The
if this will
templates
work.
handle all that for you, though. It'll do the fields that it
Yeah,
knows exist.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's right. There's also an auto map feature. Click on that. It'll actually analyze your form and analyze what you've got in MailChimp and auto map it for you. So you,
Nice. Just
so you
keeps
don't have
going,
to.
doesn't it? These little nuggets of buried treasure, Mark. Like, it's just a
Yeah,
little
look.
icon here which does a ton of work for you. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, so you'll notice it's actually mapped phone to phone number, so it finds the
Yeah.
closest match it can and maps those. Yeah, look for these
That's
icons. Just click on them and see what they do.
yeah, yeah, that's right. You've always got the undo button, remember?
Yeah, you can almost go back and
Yeah.
undo that if you make a mistake. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, super easy to modify an existing field and push that through. Now, you can actually push it to multiple things. If you want to push it to Mailchimp and to Google Sheets, you can do that. You can actually just add another action and then map that across. I can choose what sheet I want, and then I can map my fields accordingly. So first name, I can choose the column in my sheet. So yeah, you can add any number of actions that you want. You could even push things to Twilio as a text message. You can add them to Slack channels. You can do pretty much anything that you want. There are some more advanced features on those which we'll go through later on, but there's things like you can run JavaScript, you can run a WordPress hook. So when the form is submitted, you can actually run your own PHP code. That PHP code can actually return data back to your form.
Nice.
You can run a webhook, so you can actually query a third party API, and then use that to populate a form. So very simple example of that. We do a search in our knowledge base for webhook. So this is just an example of another action. If I click random person, get random person, that's going to make a request off to this endpoint, and I'm loading that data into my form.
There he is,
So
Nihal
yeah,
Osbey. Just
there he is.
perfect
Uh,
person for that.
yeah,
Oh no,
he's
Hazel Wang. Yeah, that's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That's so cool. So
yeah.
it's just consuming data. The action is to go out there, find something for these things, and then suck it back in. That's amazing.
Correct. Yeah, and you may have your own webhooks that you want to do that with. You may have your own PHP code that you want to interact with, and WS Form enables you to do that. And later on, we'll talk about post management, where you can actually use a form to create a post, or actually pull post data into a form as well. So it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost like you know what you're doing, Mark.
And-
It's pretty
exactly.
amazing. So that was that in essence, that was our first one. That was form building basics. And I think already you're getting a flavor that if that's the basics, hold on tight. There's five more
Yeah.
to come and we'll
Hold
go.
on to your hat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. We'll get the
Yeah.
propeller helmet out and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
tinfoil
One
hat.
last thing I didn't show you
Oh
was
yeah,
at the
please.
top of the toolbox is you can actually
Oh
search
yeah.
this list
Yeah.
here. So if you can't find the icon you're looking for, just type it in here. So if I type in tell, for example, it'll bring up phone.
Yeah.
So that's just a nice little tool for identifying a field that you want to add to your forms.
That's
So yeah,
great. Yeah, thank you. So there we are, form building basics. Next one next week is going to be building interactive forms. The week
yep,
after that, preventing form spam, deliverability, and form efficiency, not preventing form spam and deliverability. You don't want to prevent deliverability, but you get the point. Number 4, custom field plugin integration. Number 5, WooCommerce. Number 6, AI in forms. So
yep,
they're all coming up. Just one quick question we had right
sure.
near the beginning. It was Excelavita asked the question. I mean, I guess it's a technical one. Are
Yeah.
you using a CSS framework for the front end?
Yeah, so interestingly, WS Form will output HTML in different frameworks. So we have our own framework, which is basically what you're seeing here. Very clean framework that you can style yourself. But if you're using Foundation or Bootstrap, we will actually output HTML native to those frameworks, which makes styling forms super easy if you're using those frameworks. So if I show you the onboarding process with WS Form, I'll go to the welcome screen. What this is actually doing behind the scenes is analyzing your theme to see what framework you're using. So if I do click start and I'm a developer, you'll notice that we're asking if you're using a front end framework. Now, if it detects Bootstrap or Foundation, it'll actually say, are you using Bootstrap or Foundation? But you can choose these different frameworks here if you want. And yeah, it literally outputs different HTML for those frameworks
Good
automatically.
grief.
Yeah.
No messing. No
Yeah,
messing. So
yeah,
Excelavita, I hope that answers your
yeah.
question.
And also,
Um,
if you're using, friend of mine, Kevin Geary, he actually has built a framework as well called ACSS, which is quite
yes.
popular with the Oxygen site builder, and he has compatibility with WS Form as well. So if you're using his framework, it will work with that too.
Ta-da! Ka-ching.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. I'm gonna take the screen away. It'll just be me and you there now.
There we go.
Look at me. I'm still in heaven. Um, Rob Cairns very kindly says, "Good demo, Mark." Thank you, Rob.
Oh, thank you, Rob.
Appreciated. And oh yes, Excelavita says in answer probably to me saying, "I hope that answers your question." Great.
Great.
And Marcus Burnett says, "Just go out of a meeting. You'll catch it by rewinding, watching this." Well, set it in your diary. So we're on Wednesday, the 3rd of May. Exactly a week from now, we'll be doing the next one, and it goes on like that. You can predict the pattern. I think the 6th one, like I said at the top, we're not that sure when that's going to happen, but the other ones, yeah, the other ones are going to happen in due
Squeeze it in at
course.
some point.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week for building interactive forms. And if it's anything like as in depth as that, it'll be really worth watching. This is going to be great. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nathan. I appreciate it.
That's all right. Let's just do that one more time, just for the fun
Yeah,
of it. Yeah, look,
yeah. We're not going
no,
to wave on these. We're just
no,
going to do no
no,
arms.
yeah, yeah, no harms, Mark. Uh, I'll cancel next week's meeting, says
There you
Marcus
go.
Burnett. Yeah, that's the spirit, Marcus.
That's the
Yeah.
spirit.
All right. We'll see you again soon. Take it
Yeah.
easy.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.